welcome to another episode of Happy Hour with Steve Guy. We are here, we're back at All Saints Public House in Cleveland, but this is a different episode than maybe what we're used to or what you're used to watching. It's not virtual, it's all in person, which is super cool, but it is going to be a very special episode. I am joined by the Vice President of Education and Visitor Engagement, Jason Hanley, from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, as coming up on November 7th is the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame 2020 Induction Ceremony. Different than what we're used to in years past. Jason and I are going to talk all about it, and this episode is all dedicated to that and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's history here in Cleveland, Ohio. All right, so joining me now, swinging by for a happy hour, he is the Vice President of Education, and I'm gonna mess up the second part. Just know he's the Vice President of Education at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Jason Hanley is here to join me. What is the other half of that?
It's Vice President of Education and Visitor Engagement.
Visitor Engagement.
That's right.
That sounds way better than whatever I was going to say.
It's a long title. There's a lot to it.
It is. There is a lot to it. And we'll get into what all of that means. But first, let's talk about the fact that the induction is, it's happening. It's very different this year.
Very different, right? I mean, we're living in a world right now, Steve, where everything is different than it was planned, right?
Yeah.
And, the inductions for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is such a big thing. And over the last number of years, one of the great things about it is every other year it's here in Cleveland.
Love it.
Which is fantastic, right?
Yeah.
So it's 1 year in New York, which is where the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame was founded originally in New York City.
Yeah.
And then the other year it's here in Cleveland. Well, we had plans it should have been back in May. And just, there was no way to do it. You couldn't make it happen at that time. We had postponed it to be a live event in November. Mm-hmm. But again, it's just, there's no way you could do it with the amount of people who would have been in Public Hall. We do it here in Cleveland.
Yeah.
So now it's going to be a fully online virtual event on HBO and HBOMax. People can tune in on November 7th, check it out. But, it was a big change for us.
Yeah.
The nice thing is we've already been able to guarantee, though, that to make up for it, it will be back in Cleveland in November of 2021.
That's what we want to hear.
That's it, right? We'll bring it back here regardless. We're not going to skip our year.
As Clevelanders, we're very protective of that. Because for years it was like, well, we have the Rock Hall, but we don't get the ceremony. And then this would have been like, as much of as 2020 has been a bummer for all of us to be like, oh man, we're missing the Rock Hall ceremony?
Yeah.
Now you get to get it back. That's great news. Love that.
Yeah, and it's a fun class this year too. For me personally, it was pretty cool. There's a lot of bands I like Depeche Mode and 9 Inch Nails, which has a connection to Cleveland.
Trent Reznor.
Trent Reznor, exactly.
That's right.
But then you've also got Whitney Houston, Notorious B.I.G., the Doobie Brothers. We've got two music industry folks, Irving Azoff and John Landau, getting inducted. It's just going to be a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to the broadcast this year.
Little known thing, pretty much every bar on West 6th Street ends their night playing Whitney Houston. So
that's right.
That's got a Cleveland tie as well, believe it or not.
That's right.
It is a really cool class. I mean, I think that again, for Clevelanders, that was kind of maybe part of the disappointment is 9 Inch Nails is in there. For years, we've been like, Trent Reznor. Even if you didn't like them, you still were like, you knew they were popular enough to be like, these guys.
I'll admit a personal thing to you really quick.
Yeah.
Which is that they were nominated once before,
but
it was for a year where it would have been in New York, and I was secretly hoping they wouldn't make it in that year and make it in the year it was in Cleveland. Just because I was like, man, it was so cool. A couple years ago, the Cars got inducted.
Yeah.
And it was so cool to see Rick Ocasek get up on stage, and he said, basically, Benjamin Orr and I first met and played in a bar down the street from here.
Yeah.
And then they got inducted in public auditorium, blocks away from where they met, because Benjamin Orr was from Cleveland.
Right.
So I was kind of secretly hoping that for 9 Inch Nails, but it'll be cool to see it on the ceremony. And I'm hoping, maybe next time Trent comes back through Cleveland, we can try and do something with him, to celebrate here in Cleveland that 9 Inch Nails is going to be inducted.
It really is just it typically is an awesome evening for Cleveland. It's the closest thing I guess we have to hosting the Oscars or the Emmys or something. Everybody comes out for that night. Then after the event's over, if you've ever been downtown Cleveland, on the evening of the Rock and Roll Induction Ceremony, you could be anywhere, and it's like a who's who, and somebody pops into the bar. Years ago, Green Day popped in somewhere. They just start jamming, and you're like, what is happening here?
There were 2 different years that were so cool. Green Day was one of them, and the other was when Metallica got inducted here in Cleveland.
Yeah.
And they both did secret shows the night before the inductions in Cleveland, right? I mean, how cool is that? You've got Metallica doing a secret pop-up show, right?
I mean, it's the wildest thing, and it's so fun. I remember going to the House of Blues for an after party one of the years, and it was like Grandmaster Flash was like DJing, and I'm like, what is happening in my life right now? And I'm just watching him, and then like somewhere you looked up in the balcony, like LL Cool J was just up there hanging out. I'm like, where is this? It's the coolest thing ever. It's such a bummer, but I'm looking forward to watching this on November 7th. What can we expect, I guess, from what we're going to see?
Yeah, so it's obviously going to be a little bit different because not only can we not have it here in Cleveland, but most of these bands particularly are not even in the same place, right? I mean, the different members are spread out all over. And, you know, we toyed around with ideas that you've seen on some things with trying to get them all to play from their houses. But, you know, that gets a little bit weird sometimes. So what we really decided to do this year, what you'll see on HBO, is an awesome documentary. If you've been to the induction ceremonies or seen them on TV, you know there's those clips we usually do before a band gets inducted.
Right.
It shows their history. It's historic footage. We've mixed a lot of that along with new speeches from the artists themselves.
Okay.
And we've got a really great selection of other folks who are going to be coming on, like Dave Grohl and others, who were interviewed by the Rock Hall over the last several months, talking about the new inductees.
Very cool.
So that's going to be really exciting, where you'll get to hear all these artists saying how these new inductees were influential to them.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a really powerful, emotional evening. You won't get to see, obviously, any new performances, but just this idea of talking about the inductees and who they are, seeing some historic footage, which is going to be really cool, too.
Yeah, this really is a very historic class in terms of, you talk about influence and the influences that they have. I mean, from a rock perspective, Trent Reznor and Nine Inch Nails, it really changed the game for a lot of bands out there. Whitney Houston inspired how many of the female artists that we know now.
I mean, if you watch The Voice at all now, almost everyone on there probably owes something to Whitney Houston as this pop vocal superstar, right?
Oh, I mean, what an icon. It's sad when you look back at this stuff and you see some of these folks are gone too soon, and Whitney Houston obviously being one of them.
Yeah.
But how iconic her career was, because everything you watch, like The Voice, great example. The Voice, American Idol, anything.
Yep.
How many young women get up there and they're like, I'm going to sing Whitney Houston? And you're like, of course you are, yes. And they're teenagers.
Yeah.
But it just stands the test of time.
Absolutely. It's funny, I was even watching, Dolly Parton's been back out. She's got some new music now and everything.
Yeah.
And I saw an interview with her just recently, and they said to her, look, you've written so many songs. You've been such an icon. If there's one artist who covered you or who did something that you thought, like, changed the game, who was it? And, of course, it was Whitney Houston, right? For I Will Always Love You. I mean, she took that song to a whole new place. It was. That's one of those examples where it's more than just someone covering a song. It's like they make it their own in a unique way, right?
They really do. Yeah. And it's unbelievable. And speaking of covering songs, Nine Inch Nails, correct me if I'm wrong, was it Nine Inch Nails that did Hurt, that Johnny Cash ends up covering?
That's right. And so many people now, actually, I think, know the Johnny Cash cover more than the original.
They forget that this is, this is a Trent Reznor
deal.
But
what a great example of how, I always say that's a cool moment when you see something like a band like Nine Inch Nails that's known for having these industrial music sounds and this, techno sort of beats and that behind it. But the song at the core of it was so good that you can give it to a Johnny Cash with just like guitar and voice, and it works.
He makes it amazing. Yeah. I mean, not the Doobie Brothers and Depeche Mode, no slouches either. Obviously,
and the Doobie Brothers. I mean, they're a band that when you go back and look, they're one of those bands that went through so many versions, right? Because there's the whole point before Michael McDonald is even the lead singer with, all those great early songs. And then when Michael McDonald takes over and they have a whole nother career.
Right.
And now they're still out there.
Still out there jamming.
They would have been touring this year if the pandemic hadn't happened.
I think, was they supposed to hit Blossom?
Exactly. They were. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, they were great. And Depeche Mode, I think, is one of those bands that people kind of look at for like a couple songs there in the 80s that really stick with you. But you look at them as a whole and you're like, all right, this is very influential. You talk to some some people like musicians now, and when I think you know that a band is good, right? Historically, when you talk to artists that are out there and you're like, who influenced you? And they'll say bands like Depeche Mode.
Yeah.
And as a music fan, sometimes you're like, I don't know if I ever really got into them. But if this person says that they're really good,
right,
maybe I need to rethink this and go back.
Well, when you think about, a lot of people always ask, how does the Rock Hall, what's the parameters for someone getting inducted? And you're totally, one of the main ones is influence, right?
Right.
So did this artist do something that changed the game, influenced all these other artists? Another one we look at is impact, which is in music, but also beyond that, right? Did an artist do something that changed the world? They, stood up for social justice. They, did something around the world or impacted a whole movement. These are the types of things we look at. And then, of course, the musicianship itself, right?
For sure.
Were they good musicians? What did they do? How did they change it? And that can always get looked at in different ways. You could talk about, a band I like the band Yes. Or you can look at these guys, or Rick Wakeman and Steve Howe. I mean, they're amazing musicians, right?
Yeah.
The Ramones, maybe not, they're playing a few chords, but think about the Ramones completely revolutionized.
Changed the game, yeah.
Changed the game. And
Yeah.
punk rock comes out of that, right?
Yeah.
So
it's incredible. Like every year you're going to have people who are bummed that certain bands didn't get in.
Yes.
And they're still waiting on them to get in. But I got to imagine it's so difficult because any given year you could be like, all right, there are 20 artists that we're going to let in this year. And that would change things. But you limit it. And is there an element of, we know that this artist is going to be a huge headlining name for any given year, and so maybe you hold off? Is that a thing?
No, I'll tell you, the nominating committee in New York each year gets to usually put about anywhere between 15 and 20 artists on the ballot.
Okay.
And I will say, to the question you were asking, it's not that we do that on purpose, but often what will happen is, let's say an artist sees a resurgence.
Yeah.
Someone covers them, or all of a sudden, there's all these new bands out that are referencing somebody who's not inducted.
Sure.
Or quite frankly, even sometimes there's a biopic that comes out, right? And people are like, man, that artist was amazing. Nobody's talked about them in a long time.
Yeah.
That certainly is going to influence the nominating committee to say, hey, maybe we should put them on the ballot this year.
Okay.
And then that ballot goes out to, nowadays, I think it's close to 1,000 people voting.
Wow.
Because it's all the living inductees get to vote.
Okay.
So Trent Reznor next year is going to get a ballot.
Yeah.
And it's a bunch of industry professionals, journalists, scholars, and they all get to vote on who from that 20 is going to get inducted. But I always tell people, too, it's not chronological. I think people maybe sometimes think it should be.
Yeah.
So, I'll give you a personal example of mine. I'm a big Iron Maiden fan.
All right.
Metallica got inducted, and you're going to say, well, how do you get to Metallica without going through Iron Maiden? You can't do it, right?
That's fair, yeah.
But that doesn't mean Iron Maiden is never going to get inducted. It just means that Metallica had a year, they got put on the ballot, people did it. Sometimes, I often joke, Metallica getting inducted might improve the chances because now maybe Lars and James and all those guys are going to advocate for someone like Iron Maiden to get inducted, right?
Okay, yeah.
So don't give up hope if your favorite band's not in.
All right.
You got one you're waiting on, Steve? Is there a band you're like, man, I wish they were in and they're not?
Man, I'm looking for Kiss.
Oh, they're in, though.
They are
in. They finally made it in a few years ago. Yeah.
But that was the one that I was looking for a long time was Kiss. Yeah. But now, because they got it, I'm like, I don't know. I don't know who I'm looking for now. They were the big one for the longest time. And now I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I don't know who's next. But it's so Ohio, we're not only home to the Rock Hall, but obviously the Football Hall of Fame.
That's right.
And I think sometimes that's where the confusion comes in because we all look at that and it's chronological. A guy's retired for X amount of years, now he's eligible. And then that eligibility runs out.
That's right. Which doesn't happen with the Rock Hall. That's right.
Which is perfect. Yeah. And then I do love the fact that you could tell me how many years ago it was, but there became a fan involvement.
That's right.
With the voting process.
Yeah, I'm going to forget. It's been a couple years, like maybe 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
And that was a cool piece. And, there's people who talk about that too. Technically, all the fan votes go down to one ballot.
Okay.
So they're only getting one official ballot, which some people say, well, what does it matter then, right? But I will tell you, the fan vote is such a big deal because a lot of people look at that, including a lot of the voters.
Okay.
who often will hold off and say like, hey, I'm curious, I'm wondering who's going to win the fan vote. And that might sway the voters to changing their mind too, right?
Yeah.
And it also, I think it's a cool piece of recognition because for years, a lot of people would also say, well, look, the Rock Hall official voters got it wrong. Like everybody would have voted for this artist. Over the years we've done the fan vote, the way that's worked out and the actual final ballot of who gets inducted have been so close. They're only off by a handful, which is encouraging to those of us who work there. It's like, all right, good. Well, people are voting for a lot of the same artists that we've been inducting from the official ballot.
And then it gives the fans a point of view like, yeah, we know what we're talking about.
Yeah, totally, right.
Which
exactly.
It makes sense because, you can have a quote-unquote expert. I always look at music and like television and movies to kind of be one and the same, right? Yeah. If you look at the Oscars and the Emmys, sometimes people are getting awards, and as fans, you're like, that movie sucks. Like, what are you talking about? That was terrible. That was a snooze fest. And, music, sometimes the same way. You might have a writer who's super critical about, how the notes line up. Like we were talking about, like, the Ramones, from a musical standpoint, maybe questionable, right? But what they were doing was so incredible. Yeah. And so the fans were all on board. And the fans, of course, you don't have success in music without the fans.
Absolutely.
More than anything else, right?
Yeah, we talk about that at the museum all the time because we take that aspect of what you're talking about so seriously.
Yeah.
Because that is why there is the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Museum here in Cleveland.
Right.
That is a place for the fans to come, to experience it, to see the history. And I always say it's so different from like an art museum.
Yeah.
Because of that aspect. Like you and I could go over to the Cleveland Museum of Art, amazing institution, classic pieces of artwork up there. We're going to enjoy it, but we're probably not going to share a story where like, remember that time you drove out to California to Van Gogh? Yeah. Easy, right? But you could say that about, Led Zeppelin. Like, remember that time we did that cross-country road trip listening to Led Zeppelin the whole time? Like, because rock and roll music is often a part of people's lives, right? It's the song they heard on a first date with, someone, or the time their kids were born, or a road trip they took, or a special moment in their life.
It was about weddings, right?
Weddings,
your first dance as a married couple, or father-daughter.
To this song, right?
Yeah.
Songs you grew up to, or your friends used to listen to. So I always say that every person who walks in the door at the museum, they are bringing the history of rock and roll with them already. Yeah. And our job, going back to my title, education and visitor engagement, because the awesome thing about my job is I get to think about every single person who walks in there as a potential student, but also someone who can walk in that door with the history with them. So they're going to bring their own story of rock and roll. And our job then is to connect that version of rock and roll up to a bigger history we're trying to tell about the artist, who's inducted, but we have tons of stuff from artists who aren't inducted.
So much. That's what I love about the Rock Hall is it's the history, but it brings you current too. There's always this modern stuff that rolls through. Like I remember Lady Gaga's meat dress being in there.
Probably one of the most talked about artifacts we had in years, right? And a crazy story around how that thing ended up there. But it's pretty amazing. Like you said, you can tie that. I love seeing that in multi-generational aspects, where you can look at the grandparents who are into one thing, the parents who are into another, the grandkids who are into another. Right. And you've got 3 generations walking around the Rock Hall, and they're all telling different stories. Yeah. That's awesome.
So let's talk about the title itself. The VP of Education. Like, what does that mean? When people look at the Rock Hall, they think about going through and checking out the exhibits and looking at all the artifacts that are there. But there's so much more. And that's where your title comes into play.
Yeah, that's right. And we take that idea of the mission of the museum is to engage, teach, and inspire through the power of rock and roll. And if you think about it, there's so many ways you can interact with students through rock and roll again, right? Yeah. So we do education programs, again, not this year, but in a typical year, we could see over 20,000 students and teachers coming through the museum to participate in our education programs. And those are unique from, toddler programs we do, which bring kids here in the city of Cleveland who are in Head Start programs to learn about their letters, numbers, social skills, but we do it all through song and dance and music in the museum.
Okay.
Our kindergarten through 12th grade programs where students come in and they might be learning about history. Let's say you're taking an American history class.
Yeah.
But you can learn about, the 60s civil rights movement or, responses to the Vietnam War or the Cold War and do that through rock and roll, right?
Which was huge.
Tie
Yeah.
the lyrics of Bob Dylan to, the Vietnam era or tie the music of Aretha Franklin to social justice and the civil rights movement in the 1960s. So, and we even teach about things like science because, students, they have to learn how sound works.
Yeah.
Even here, you and I are talking, but it's being captured by microphones, sent to cameras. Like, how does sound work? How does a musician use an amplifier and a guitar to make music? We do college programs.
Okay.
Through we have a partnership with Case Western Reserve University and Cuyahoga Community College, the great community college here, where we teach programs through those. And we even do adult education programs at night that you can come do for free and learn about the history of the music. So for me, that's the amazing thing. Like every day I walk into the Rock Hall, it's something a little bit different. We teach all these different age groups, and it's exciting to work there and think, how do you do that at all these different age levels, but still use rock and roll as this powerful piece of cultural history to teach about all these subjects?
That's so cool because, so this year, 25 years since the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame opened its doors, September 1995. And we still know as Clevelanders, we always meet people who are like, no, I've never been to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Because they think of it much as maybe we think as the Pro Football Hall of Fame or let's say Cooperstown. It's a destination, right? People go to and they visit. And some people kind of take it for granted the fact that it's here and don't realize that all of that stuff is happening.
Totally.
Like,
I often refer to it as like the same thing you were saying, like the Statue of Liberty phenomenon, right?
Yeah.
Like people, can be living in New York City and you ask them, like, you ever been to the Statue of Liberty? No. But people travel from around the world to see it. Right. And, I think that's something that if you think about something I wish a lot of people who live in Cleveland knew is that there's so much that happens. We do community events. We do, free days at the museum. We do live concerts. Last year, we had over 100 live music events happen on the plaza, and 90% of those were free.
Wow.
This year, even during the pandemic, we said, you know what, we're going to find a way, since we ended up reopening on June 14th.
Okay.
How could we continue to have some sort of live music and connect to the community? So we went out and found local musicians who had nowhere to play, right? Bars and clubs are shut down.
Right.
And we said, look, we have an outdoor plaza that's safe. We can effectively social distance. We can have masks. We can set it up on this outdoor area with our cool beer garden we have. And we featured over, I think it was 20 local bands from Cleveland or Northeast Ohio and said, come out and play. And we made those concerts free.
That's awesome.
And it was a really cool thing to be able to do. And, it was fun for us because we obviously love music.
Of course.
But it was so cool to see the bands be like, man, this was great. Like, I haven't been able to play in front of an audience, in 5 months.
Right.
So.
And that plaza has really become something special and awesome. It's one of those things where you used to go to the Rock Hall and you'd walk up, you're like, man, this is a lot of space up here. and I think that for years, a lot of us thought, like, man, wouldn't it be so cool to have something out there? And so what's been happening has been really tremendous with that aspect of it, with the live concerts outside.
Totally, man. I think the funny thing is, what you just said, I was wondering, like, did you work for the architectural firm? Like, we hired this group a few years ago and said, like, we want to refresh the museum. It's always been great, right? But how do you refresh it? Because it's been here for 25 years.
Yeah.
And one of the number one things they said to us, they were like, you guys are underutilizing this plaza. There's so much space out there. This could be so cool.
We got a Johnny Cash tour bus,
right?
And that's what we got.
And that's it, right? And working with them, our team developed the idea of putting those long live rock letters out front,
right?
Which have become iconic now, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I can't even picture the Rock Hall without them anymore.
Yeah, it's almost like one of those things where it's like, why did this ever exist? Because, you think about, the Love
statue in Philadelphia,
right? And all these different things. And we, of course, we have the Cleveland signs. It's like, why wouldn't you have something like that at the Rock Hall?
And then to say, like, take that, pop up a seasonal stage outside.
Yeah.
And it's, last year, it wasn't just local bands and smaller bands. We had Parliament Funkadelic play a stop on their farewell tour. We had a cool indie band Interpol play out there. We had the Zombies, who had just gotten inducted into the Rock Hall play. So it was an incredible mix of music. And that makes that a destination, where people can come and hang out. For anyone who officially lives in the city of Cleveland proper, like your driver's license says Cleveland, not, Cleveland Heights, Westlake, Shaker Heights, Parma. Right. If it says Cleveland, you can get into the Rock Hall for free all year round, which is a really cool thing, right?
It is.
And a lot of the concerts we even do, there's usually a discounted price for Clevelanders. So, that idea that the Rock Hall is just a tourist destination, we really want to change that. It's a place you can come for community events, for live shows, for just to hang out with friends, outside in the summer. And even now, during the time of the pandemic, we've been doing a lot of online free programs.
Okay.
We've done ones over the last few months with Ziggy Marley, with Bootsy Collins from Parliament Funkadelic. Yeah. We did a great day with Kevin Lyman, who founded the Warped Tour. And we got a doctor from the Cleveland Clinic and some local musicians to talk about mental health on World Mental Health Day. Wow. Which was something that I think a lot of people are struggling with now.
Absolutely.
And we wanted to say, hey, there's a lot of musicians out there and a lot of ways for you to get help if that's something you're struggling with at home, or you don't have your job right now.
Yeah.
How do you find that? Because that community investment's also that really important piece for us, not just being a tourist attraction and a venue, right?
Yeah, it's really grown so much. I mean, you're talking to somebody as a kid when the Rock Hall opens in 1995.
Yeah.
My father and stepmother grabbed Family Pass for them and 4 boys living in that house.
Get out of here.
And we would go there all the time. I mean, like the first 2 years we had a Family Pass, and so I would go there constantly.
That's awesome.
And I understand that there are people who are like, I don't know if that's worth it for me, but I'm like, people come into town, I tell them, go to the Rock Hall all the time. Last time, granted, I was there was probably 4 or 5 years ago, maybe longer. It was the Rolling Stones exhibit.
Oh, yeah. Great exhibit.
And I was with some friends who were in town from Canada, and we were going to do something in the evening, and I was like, they're like, what about the Rock Hall? I'm like, yeah, we'll go to the Rock Hall. Yeah. And they're like, but what else should we do for the day? I'm like, let's start there.
Right.
Spent 5.5 hours in the Rock Hall. And this is a guy I've been to the Rock Hall, but I'm in there for 5.5 hours because I just tell people, like, if you even really like music, there is so much in there going on and things to do. And that's me not even having kids, from an educational standpoint, things that you can do. And I love that more and more is happening. And I love the idea of people in Cleveland and surrounding communities finding out more and more of this.
Yeah.
And I think right now a lot of people didn't realize you guys even opened back up in June.
That's right. And, we had to find a really careful, safe way to do it.
Yeah.
We've limited our capacity, and you got to buy tickets online, like timed entry right now, because that way we can control how many people come through. Perfect. But, you think about a museum, the good thing is we are always about making sure we're safe and clean, and everything said, because we're protecting all these artifacts and everything, right? Now, unfortunately, it does mean some things. We opened this incredible exhibit just over a year ago called The Garage, where people can come in and actually perform and play. Yeah. So you could walk in and we can go over and grab a guitar, sit at a keyboard, grab a bass, or sit in front of a drum set and play. Cool. That's something we can't do right now because I can't hand you a guitar and have the next person play it.
Right.
Because of the safety. But we are excited when, hopefully, fingers crossed, this all eventually goes away and we get back to something, the new normal, whatever that's going to be, to bring back those exhibits, because that brings this life into it too, where I'll tell you, that exhibit was so incredible when we opened it, to sit there and watch families come in and see, we had people like parents who said, man, I haven't played an instrument since college. And they would come in and play, and their kids were like, Dad, I didn't even know you played. Or, Mom, what are you doing in front of the drum set? This is crazy, Yeah. And that was such a powerful experience. But it's emblematic of that whole thing, like you were saying, people will often call me like, well, how long does it take to get through the Rock Hall? It's like, I guess you can do it in 2 hours. Good. But like you're going to miss a lot. Like that experience is something we have people spend the whole day. Yeah. Because again, that thing I said earlier, it brings back the memories, right?
It does.
People are going to connect to it. I've seen people come in front of an exhibit and stand there in tears because it brings back memories for them. They think of somebody, maybe who's passed on, who was a friend of theirs, who loved this band, or it meant so much to them in their life. And that's that thing that music is this incredibly powerful thing. I know it is for me, right? I mean, I can't even imagine my life personally without music and what it's meant to me and my wife and I and our kids. I mean, we bond so much around music.
Yeah.
And that is, again, what this museum is. It's about those experiences, not just the artist or the music, but about our experience of it.
Yeah, whether we know it or not, just like movies have a soundtrack, we've got a soundtrack to our lives.
Totally.
And sometimes it's taking that walk through and seeing something and it registers with you like, oh man, this takes me back.
Yeah.
And it's an amazing thing. And I don't even know, do family passes still exist?
Yeah.
This is,
not
25
quite
years
like
ago,
that
we
anymore,
had
but
that
there are
moment.
family memberships
Yeah.
where you can get a membership. And I'll also say, not to put the plug in here, but to put the plug in.
Do it.
When somebody buys a membership like that, it's
Yeah.
not just the admission. They're getting year-round admission, but they're also, that money is helping support all these education programs. And I say that all the time. Every program I do, if you ever watch me hosting something online or in the museum, I start out every program thanking the members, because I know that we wouldn't be able to educate all these students.
Yeah.
We have an online education platform called Rock Hall EDU.
Okay.
You can get to it right from the main.com. It has materials that are free for any school teacher around the world who wants to tap into what you and I have been talking about today.
Yeah.
They can go online and sign up for an account and use all of that for free.
Oh, wow.
Right now, we're even posting a lot of stuff for families, because we realize a lot of parents,
Stuck
like
at
myself,
home.
are stuck at home with kids. Like, man, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
Hey, here's a cool rock and roll activity you can use on Rock Hall EDU. And again, membership helps support those type of activities.
Yeah.
And that's what it means, because we're a nonprofit. We're not a for-profit company. We're a nonprofit. So everything we do, again, that mission, engage, teach, and inspire. Yeah, we're going to have big concerts. Yeah, we're going to do induction ceremonies.
Of course.
All of that comes back to that mission of educating people and supporting this legacy of rock and roll.
Yeah, I think, I think that there are people who just haven't paid close enough attention for the last 25 years who wanted the Rock Hall to be all that it is.
Yeah.
And have the concerts, but do the education and do all this cool stuff. And they've just kind of sat back. Maybe they went once 15 years ago.
Right.
And they were like, yeah, well, it's like, no, man, pay attention. There's so much more going on. Like those memberships are great, because if you're someone that lives in the area and you can't spend 5 or 6 hours there, you can keep going back,
coming,
especially
right?
if you have the kids and you could take them to, when it was happening, the garage, and spend a half an hour in there and then come back a month from now.
That's
or
right.
whatever. Like, you could just keep returning. Plus, I love the fact that there are exhibits that come in and out. 25 years now, we've got it's a Cleveland State's campus, right? There's a whole archive center right by there.
Yeah, it's on the community college, right?
That's what it is,
Tri-Cities.
Tri-Cities, yeah.
And literally, we have amassed so much stuff over the years. We have an archive. And a lot of people don't know, it's actually open to the public. You have to make an appointment.
Okay.
But you can go on the Rock Hall website, you can call and make an appointment, and you can come and look at some of that archival material we have in there, which is, there's some awesome stuff. Like, that's a whole nother world.
Yeah.
We have, like, Ahmet Erdogan, who was one of the founders of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
He was the original founder of Atlantic Records.
Yeah.
Signed everyone from Aretha Franklin to Ray Charles to Led Zeppelin to Yes. He donated his archive to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I was in there one time looking, and there's like letters that he and Aretha Franklin wrote back and forth to each other.
How cool is that?
And you can go in there and look at these things. It's, plus there's just all these great books on the history of rock and roll.
Yeah.
So that's where, again, we're supporting that history and legacy, for people to be able to look at. And you're right, that stuff with a membership, you can keep coming back and doing that. Our curatorial team works so hard, man. There's always new exhibits. There's new stuff. Every year now for the new inducted class we were talking about, there's a brand new exhibit every year.
Right.
This year, not to keep talking about Nine Inch Nails, but Trent
Okay.
Reznor did this incredibly cool thing where he decided, instead of just having an exhibit where we got some artifacts from him and figured out how to display them, he basically designed with his team an installation. And it's got a Yamaha DX7, a mannequin he had designed of him with clothing that he wore at the Woodstock, the famous Woodstock.
The 96 one?
Yeah, and It's just so cool.
99?
98. Was it 98? I think it was Woodstock 98.
Yeah, sure. One of those.
Someone will fact check us.
Yeah, yeah. Producer Ryan?
But it was this incredible
94?
installation.
94 says producer. That makes sense. 25 years.
Yep.
There it is.
This awesome collection that, he designed this thing that's up there that just looks so amazing. But, we've also got this great stuff again from all the other artists.
Yeah.
I'm a keyboard player myself.
Yeah.
So it's a really geeky, if you're into synthesizers and keyboards, because there's Depeche Mode ones, there's Nine Inch Nails ones, there's Doobie Brothers keyboards, because they're such a big keyboard band.
Yeah, so, what's up with the keyboards?
Yeah, it's a totally nerdy keyboard year. If you're into keyboards, this is the year to come check it out.
If you thought there wasn't a theme to these inductions.
That's right.
It's all about the keyboard.
That's right.
It makes sense. Listen, I did a little bit of the research on you, Jason. I mean, I know that you are an industrial rock guy.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
The Nine Inch Nails love makes perfect sense there.
Yeah, that was my whole thing. I actually, people joke with me like, oh, the doctor of rock. And I'm like, yeah, well, not to brag, but technically, yes. I actually went and did my PhD at Stony Brook University in New York on music. And my dissertation for the PhD was on industrial rock, like Nine Inch Nails.
Right.
But I was tracing it all the way back to these early bands out of Germany, like Einstürzende Neubauten, and these British bands like Throbbing Gristle. But it was a cool thing for me to investigate basically how rock and roll also took this experimental, like, electronic music and brought it into it, right? Depeche Mode's part of that story too, right? Yeah. And this year's a cool year because of all these bands getting inducted finally that tapped into that, right?
Yeah.
So for me, that's where my whole history of my academic career and researching and all this now is playing out in the history of what the Rock Hall is doing too.
So if anybody's really bummed that the induction ceremony isn't happening here this year.
Yeah, so when people write and complain, it's like, dude, you are not more bummed than I am. Like, I am equally as bummed. But look, what are we gonna do, man? We're living in this world.
Yeah.
You and I are being socially distant here, luckily able to do this, but minimal crew out here taking care of us today.
Yeah.
This is the world we're living in, and we got to be safe and take care of it. And it'll turn around. I'm an optimist at heart. Knock on the bar. It's all gonna fire back up eventually, but we got to be careful and safe. And that's the great thing too. The Rock Hall is going to be there. We're celebrating 25 years. We're looking forward to another 25. And one day we'll be able to get Trent and Nine Inch Nails to come to Cleveland and do something cool with us, just because we always do.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna throw one idea out here.
All right.
For that front area.
For the front plaza, yeah.
Yes. And it's a warmer weather thing, obviously, not right now. What about movie screenings of movies that have to do with music and rock and roll? You know what
we have talked about that, man. You're tapped into the zeitgeist here, right? So we do have a film series.
Yeah.
And also, we normally run it in the winter. It usually runs January through, like, May.
Okay.
And we have a great theater, the Foster Theater in the museum.
Right. Yeah.
And we can show films there, and people say, like, oh, well, that's on Blu-ray. Why do I need to come? Because we have an incredible screen and sound system. Yeah, that is different than watching it at home. We had talked about potentially doing it this year. The only reason we didn't pull it off, we were trying to figure out again with all these COVID restrictions how to do it, and it just didn't, like, it couldn't click. But we have talked about that. Like, I keep joking, imagine seeing, like, Song Remains the Same or Purple Rain by Prince out there on a big screen on the lawn. Tommy, right.
I'll go watch that thing you do with Tom Hanks.
Yeah, right. So no joke, man. I think we'll probably end up seeing us do something like that next summer. Doing a really cool film screening outside in the evening for people to watch. Because that's a great thing to sit by the lakefront, and now one of the big things on our horizon that we're planning for in the future is you might have seen it in the newspaper and that we purchased the land between us and the Science Center next to us. And we are going to expand the Rock Hall into that space because after 25 years, we just don't have enough room.
So much stuff.
And the history of rock and roll keeps adding up, right?
History doesn't end.
Doesn't end. That's right. It keeps going. So we're going to expand into that space. But now that lawn that's out there is part of what we can tap into too. So, we're looking forward to next year. Does that mean we can pop up a cool screen out there and show some films or something?
Can these concerts be even bigger?
Right, totally.
Yeah. Yep. All right, since I said it, what are like two of your favorite movie rock bands?
Oh, like what? Bands that have been in movies?
Yeah,
or
yeah, yeah. Like the fake ones.
Fake bands?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, obviously, I got to go with the obvious one, Spinal Tap.
Right.
Right?
I knew you were gonna say.
Well, how could you not? I mean, it was such a brilliant movie at the time because it made fun of everything, all the excesses that like rock and roll revels in
Yes.
are also the ones that are the most ridiculous, right?
No, 100%.
And of course, a lot of people don't know this, but the whole famous Hello Cleveland that's in the movie.
Yeah.
You know how when they lead to that part of the Spinal Tap show, there's the guy giving them the directions in the basement. He's like, they're back to me like, where are we? Where's the stage? They're like, go down, make a right, go left, and then they keep getting lost. That was a joke about Public Auditorium in Cleveland.
Really?
Yeah, because two things about that. There is a massive, weird underground tunnel system down there.
Yes.
And two, Public Auditorium is actually two venues, Public Hall and Public Auditorium.
Right.
And depending on which part you came up in, you came up on a different stage. So musicians used to joke about what a nightmare that was, and it ended up in the film. And that's the famous
awesome.
Hello Cleveland line, right?
Never knew that. That's great.
All right, I got to think of another one. What is another famous sort of fake band that I really, really enjoy?
Let's see, for the comedic purposes, I love Wild Stallions.
Oh, we did. My kids and my wife and I just watched the new Bill and Ted.
ones.
I thought it was
good.
great, man.
Oh, so
Yeah.
great. I mean, just a perfect tribute to music, right?
Absolutely.
Like, you talk about what that is, and movies and music, I always say, like, what a great location Cleveland is in terms of fusing those things together. There's just so much history. You talk about Spinal Tap.
Yeah.
You talk about In the Light of Day, Joan Jett.
Yeah, right.
Michael J.
Filmed here in
Fox,
Cleveland
filmed here, yeah.
with Trent Reznor backing up in that movie, in fact. Yeah.
Right. So many cool little tidbits like
Yeah,
that.
Wild Style is such a great movie. You're right. I mean, the whole Bill and Ted series, but that's a great band. I'll throw one other one in too.
Okay.
If you've ever seen the movie The Commitments,
I don't think
great movie about this bunch of folks in Ireland who want to form this sort of soul band.
All right.
And it's a great, great movie if you haven't seen it, all about these trials and tribulations. And, they're trying to get Wilson Pickett to come to their show, and will he show up or not? It's just another one of these great sort of tributes to the passion people have for rock and roll,
There's so much of it. It's man, it's so cool. 1995 again, going back that far. I think that was the year that Thing You Do came out. So you got the Wonders there, and which was a really cool tribute to that time frame of what music was too.
And a lot of people don't realize, Tom Hanks, who put that together, he is often a producer of our Rock Hall induction shows. Because if you've ever seen, the inductions are partially produced by Playtone. That's Tom Hanks' company that he put together. Yeah, so there's that
awesome
movie
is that?
connection even right to the Rock Hall.
And again, bringing it back to Cleveland. Who loves Cleveland? Tom Hanks.
Totally.
Tom Hanks
got a big
loves
start
Cleveland.
here in Cleveland, actually.
Yeah. Huge.
So what was it? Where did he get it started? It was one of the Cleveland Playhouse?
Great Lakes Theater.
And he did a great streaming thing with them during this whole pandemic, talking about how he loved Cleveland and got his start here, which was so cool, right?
Yep. Gotta love it.
But he's a massive rock and roll fan.
Oh,
I will admit, I've been lucky enough over the years in my role to get to interview so many Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductees or be there. And I will say at one of the induction ceremonies, I was standing, this happened to be in New York, I was standing in the Barclays Center where we do it, watching the bands rehearse, and Tom Hanks walked up next to me, and it was like, even for me, it was one of those like, it's Tom Hanks.
He's one of those guys.
Yeah, he's just so cool, right?
I don't know what to say right now.
It's the Chris Farley moment, right? Like, remember that time you were in that movie? Man, that was so cool.
Chris, are there guys like that you think, all right, I was going to wind this down, but this just throws another question in my head. I'm a huge pro wrestling nerd. People who watch the show
my
know
brother
this.
is too. Shout out to my brother Chris, who is also a huge pro wrestling.
Producer Ryan on this show, also a big pro wrestling nerd.
Yeah.
But the thing, one of the things that WWE does that's kind of cool, a lot of people hate it, is that they do have like a sort of celebrity wing of somebody that's been a part of WWE or done something like that. Do you think there's ever a moment where the Rock Hall gets to that, like somebody who is contributed, but it's not necessarily that they've been an artist, right? Or just draws attention to a moment, because you say Chris Farley, and of course we all think about that Paul McCartney.
Yeah, right. That classic,
yeah,
right?
right. You remember when you guys died, but you weren't really dead? Yeah. Yeah, do you remember that? Like, you know what I mean? Like, there are these beautiful moments like that. Or Saturday Night Live still, Tom Hanks, again, with Aerosmith on Wayne's World, right?
That's right.
Or even Wayne's World, Wayne and Garth being apart, things
Another
like that.
great sort of fictional rock and roll thing.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So will there, maybe it's just an exhibit? Do you think, is that something that ever comes in?
Yeah, totally, right? I mean, so we do even have a category now where we induct people in the music industry who weren't artists, right? In fact, I mentioned this year, John Landau, who famously, you know, managed Springsteen and all that, and Irving Azoff, who managed the Eagles and, you know, Stevie Nicks. And we had a very cool exhibit a few years ago. It's actually out touring around the country right now called Rock on Television, that showcase some of these cool moments like Wayne's World and the things. But yeah, that's a great example of what you're talking about, the impact rock and roll has on culture, even outside of the music itself, right?
Oh, yeah.
All of these great comedy bits or movies and films. The Blues Brothers, I forgot to mention that.
Oh, yeah.
One of my all-time favorites, right? Thinking of a fictional band that was just so great. And what Belushi and Aykroyd did with that, which basically spawned the House of Blues, came out of that whole Blues Brothers concept, right? Yeah, I think, you know, that's that history and that legacy that's so important. And it'd be cool to do sort of an exhibit on some of those things, right? Like other ways rock and roll had gone into all these other parts of culture. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, Jason, thank you so much for swinging by. Again, for those watching this at home, November 7th on HBO, anywhere else?
HBO and HBOMax. That's it,
right?
man.
November 7th, what, 8 o'clock?
Yep, 8 o'clock.
8 p.m.
And
Eastern.
because HBO Max streams, you'll be able to watch it afterwards if you have it too.
Ooh, beautiful. I had that.
Me too.
I'm very excited. I'm very excited to watch it. Do we call it the induction ceremony?
Yeah, it still is. It's still an official induction ceremony.
Watch the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony. A little bit different this year, but again, it will come back next year to Cleveland. You heard it here from one of the guys himself, so you know it's legit. We only bring the best guests with the pertinent information to you from the show.
That's right.
Man, anything else you want to tell folks about?
No, man, that's it. And thank you so much for having me on. It was great hanging out with you today and having me on the happy hour. Salud.
Yes, salud. Thank you, sir. So, there you have it, folks. Watch it November 7th. Thanks so much to Jason for swinging by happy hour and having that long, extensive conversation. Just, man, really just shooting the breeze about music and the Rock Hall's history in Cleveland. It was so cool. One of my favorite conversations to date. Sorry, other guests, don't take that personally. It's cool. But we've come to the point of the show where we say, here's to you, and we raise our glass and give cheers and just say, hey, something positive that's been going on and really saying, here's to you. And this one's going to be very simple. It's going to go with the theme that we've been having. This year, as we mentioned in the conversation with Jason, marks 25 years of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland, Ohio. So it's that simple, folks. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, here's to you. 25 years and so many more. That's it, guys. That's this special episode, the Rock Hall, the Rock and Roll, I don't know, whatever episode you want to call this, the Rock and Roll special of Happy Hour with Steve Guy. Thanks so much to Jason Hanley. Thanks so much to All Saints Public House in Cleveland. And thanks so much to all of you for swinging by Happy Hour with Steve Guy.